The warning lights came too late. Doyen barely had time to pull his hands from the engine panel before the shuttle lurched sideways. Tools flew across the cramped cabin. His wrench bounced off the wall and struck his shoulder. The pain was sharp, but he ignored it. Pain meant nothing when you grew up fixing machines in the cold void between planets. He scrambled to the pilot seat and checked the screens. His heart dropped. A massive ship had appeared from nowhere. It was bigger than any human vessel he had ever seen. The metal hull looked like it was made from dark bones, twisted and sharp. Heights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. No, 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 Don muttered. He grabbed the controls and fired the thrusters. The shuttle groaned but moved forward. For a moment he thought he might escape. Then the tractor beam hit. His shuttle stopped moving. Engines screamed as they fought against the invisible force, but it was useless. Doyen felt the pull dragging him backward toward that enormous ship. He slammed his fist against the console. After everything he had survived, after years working the asteroid mines, after losing me, he refused to die like this. The shuttle was pulled into a dark opening in the alien ship. The bay was huge. Diane could see dozens of other small ships trapped there, all from different worlds. Some looked like insects made of crystal. Others were covered in strange symbols. None of them were human. His shuttle hit the floor with a crash. The impact threw him against his seat. The straps dug into his chest. Everything went quiet except for the hiss of air leaking from a crack in the hull. Diane unbuckled and grabbed his tool bag. His hands found Mingy's repair tools by touch. He had carried them every day since the accident. They were old, worn, but they worked just like him. The shuttle door was torn open from outside. Doyen raised his hands, squinting against the bright light. 3 massive figures stepped into view. They were not human, not even close. Each creature stood at least 8 feet tall. They had 4 arms, thick with muscle, and covered in dark scales. Their heads were angular with eyes that glowed amber. In the shadows, curved horns rose from their skulls. They wore armor made of the same bone-like material as their ship. Each carried weapons that hummed with energy. One of them grabbed Dian by his jacket and lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. He dangled in the air face to face with the creature. Its breath was hot. Its teeth were sharp enough to tear through metal. It said something in a language that sounded like grinding stones and distant thunder. When Down didn't respond, the creature shook him once and threw him to the floor. Down rolled and came up on his feet. His legs shook, but he stayed standing. He would not kneel. MJI had taught him that, no matter how bad things got, you stood up. The creatures pushed him forward through corridors that twisted like intestines. The walls pulsed with that same heartbeat rhythm. Other prisoners shuffled alongside him. Down saw beings with too many eyes, creatures that floated instead of walked, things that looked like living rocks. They were all put into a large chamber with walls made of energy bars. The floor was cold metal. There was no furniture, no water, nothing, just prisoners from a dozen different worlds, all trapped together. Down found a corner and sat down. He watched the others. Most looked terrified. Some were injured. A few were already dead, their bodies lying in pools of strange colored blood. Hours passed, maybe days. It was hard to tell. The lights never changed. Doan studied everything. The guards walked past every 30 minutes. The energy bars flickered every time the ships Heartbeat pulsed. There was a panel near the door that sparked occasionally. Broken, probably. He pulled out his tools, old habit. When things were broken, you fixed them. That was what kept you alive in the asteroid colonies. Down approached the panel carefully. The guards were on the other side of the chamber. He opened the panel with a flat tool and looked inside. The wiring was completely different from human technology, but broken was broken in any language. A connection had come loose. Heat damage, maybe from a power surge. He worked quietly, using a piece of wire from his pocket to bridge the gap. His hands were steady. This was what he knew. This was what he was good at. The panel stopped sparking. The light stabilized. A low hum filled the air as the gravity system balanced out. Several prisoners looked up, surprised. That was when Doyen heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, different from the guards. Figure emerged from the shadows of the corridor. It was one of the creatures, but bigger, older. Its scales were covered in white scars that crossed over each other like a map of violence. Its forearms bore rings of dark metal. Its eyes glowed brighter than the others, like molten gold. This was someone important. Doyen could feel it in the way the guards stepped aside, the way the very air seemed to change. The creature stopped in front of the energy bars. It looked directly at Doyen. Its gaze was heavy, weighing him like a piece of meat in a market. It spoke. The words were still in that grinding language, but there was something different in the tone, a question maybe. Diane said nothing. He just stared back. He would not look away. He would not show fear. That was all he had left. Creature tilted its head. One of its hands gestured to the fixed panel. It said something that might have been a question or a challenge. Doyen pointed to his tools, then to the panel, then back to himself. The message was clear. I fixed it. The creature studied him for a long moment, then it did something unexpected. It laughed. The sound was like rocks falling down a mountain, but it was definitely laughter. It turned and walked away. The guards followed. But before it disappeared into the corridor, it looked back one more time. It said a single word that Doyen didn't understand, but he would learn that word. He would learn what it meant to be tested by Kavos, the alpha hunter of the Vraus. Another prisoner, a thin creature with 6 limbs, crawled closer to Dian. It spoke in broken, accented words that were almost human. You foolish. That was Death Lord. He never comes here. Never looks at prey. Doyen leaned back against the wall. His body hurt. His mind was tired, but something in him, something stubborn and human, refused to break. Good, he said quietly. Let him look. The ship's heartbeat pulsed. Again, somewhere in the distance, doors opened. The sound of machinery echoed through the corridors. The trials were about to begin, and Doyen was ready to show these creatures what a human could do. The arena floor was covered in sand and old blood. Doyen stood at its center, gripping the dull blade they had given him. The weapon was heavy and poorly balanced. The edge was so worn it could barely cut skin, let alone the thick hide of the creature circling him. Above, in the observation deck, Kavos watched with his forearms crossed. Dozens of other Vraxes filled the seats there, amber eyes gleaming in the shadows. They wanted to see the weak human die. Doyen could feel their hunger for violence, like heat from a fire. The creature across from him was called a bone crusher. At least that was what the guards had called it. The thing stood on 4 legs, each as thick as tree trunks. Its head was all jaw filled with teeth. Like broken glass, spikes covered its back. It snorted and steam rose from its nostrils. Doyen's heart pounded. Fear tried to take control, but he pushed it down. Fear would get him killed. He needed to think. The bone crusher charged. Doyen dove to the side. Creature's jaws snapped closed where his head had been a second before. Sand exploded around him as he rolled. He came up running, circling toward the arena wall. The crowd roared. They thought he was running away. Maybe he was, but running had kept him alive in the asteroid mines. When equipment failed, running had saved him. When cave-ins threatened to bury him alive, the bone crusher turned slower than its initial charge. Doyen kept moving. Watching the arena, there were pillars holding up the observation deck. Old metal beams, probably decorative, but metal was metal. He ran toward the nearest pillar. The bone crusher followed, picking up speed. Its feet shook the ground. Doyen could hear its breathing getting closer. At the last second, he jumped to the side. Creature couldn't stop in time. It crashed into the pillar with a sound like thunder. The beam cracked. The bone crusher staggered back, shaking its massive head. Doyen didn't wait. He ran to another pillar and struck it with his blade once, twice, 3 times. The metal rang out. The bone crusher roared and charged again, seeing him as an easier target than thinking. Doyen moved. The creature hit the second pillar. This one bent under the impact. Cracks spread up the metal. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were confused. This wasn't how prey was supposed to act. 3 more charges, 3 more pillars. The arena groaned. Dust fell from above. The 5th pillar collapsed completely, and part of the observation deck sagged. The Vrouse in that section scrambled away. The bone crusher was tired now, breathing hard. Its charges were slower. Doyen was tired too, his legs burning, but he had one more move. He ran to the largest pillar, the main support. He hit it with his blade and screamed, making himself the most obvious target possible. The bone crusher pawed the ground and charged one final time, putting all its strength into the attack. Doyen waited until the last possible moment, then he dropped flat to the ground. The bone crusher hit the pillar at full speed. The entire structure exploded. Metal beams fell like rain. The creature was buried under tons of debris. Its legs kicked once, twice, then went still. Silence filled the arena. Doyen stood up slowly. He was covered in dust and scratches. His chest hurt from breathing too hard, but he was alive. The bone crusher was not. Kavros rose from his seat. He descended to the arena floor, walking through the rubble like it wasn't there. His golden eyes were fixed on Doyen. He stopped a few feet away and spoke in that grinding language. The words were still meaningless to Doyen, but the tone was different. Not angry, not disappointed. Curious. A side door opened. Guards brought in another prisoner. This one was human, a woman with short black hair and tired eyes. She wore the remains of a researcher's uniform. She looked at Doyen and her eyes widened. "You're human," she said in Korean. Her voice cracked from disuse. "So are you," Doyen replied. Kavos gestured and the guards pushed her forward. He said something, pointing between Diane and the woman. "He wants me to translate," she said. "My name is Hana. I was a linguist before they took me. I've been here for 3 months. She looked around the destroyed arena. "What did you do?" survived they. Said simply, Hana spoke to Kavros in his language. The words sounded wrong coming from a human mouth, but Kavros listened. He responded, his forearms gesturing. Hana translated, he says you fight like a coward, using tricks instead of strength, but you won. She paused. He's going to test you more. He wants to see if you can do it again or if you just got lucky. Tell him I'll pass every test, Diane said. Hana stared at him. Are you insane? These trials are designed to kill. I've watched dozens of beings die in this arena. Then tell him she did. Kavos's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He spoke again. He says the next trial is tomorrow. Rest while you can. Hana hesitated. Why are you doing this? Why not just beg for mercy? Doyen touched the tools on his belt. I made a promise to someone I don't give up. Over the next week, Doyen faced 6 more trials. Each one was designed to kill him in a different way. He fought creatures with poison claws. He crossed pits filled with acid. He solved deadly puzzles, while traps shot spikes at him from the walls. Each time he survived, not through strength but through observation, through thinking, through refusing to quit even when his body wanted to collapse. Hana was brought to translate. After each trial she began to teach him basic Vraz words during the rest periods: danger, death, honor, hunt. They're obsessed with hunting, she explained one night in their cell. To them, life is about being predator or prey. The strong hunt, the weak die. That's their entire philosophy. What about us? Doyen asked. Humans, they don't even have a word for us yet. We failed their initial test when they observed Earth. Too divided, too weak. Not worth recruiting. She looked at him with something like hope. But you're changing that. Every trial you pass, they talk more about humans, about whether they judged wrong. Doyen leaned against the wall. His body was covered in bruises and cuts. His hands shook from exhaustion, but his mind was clear. When I was 10, he said quietly, my sister MJI died in a mining accident. The colony didn't have enough safety equipment. The company said it was too expensive. She was in a tunnel when it collapsed. He closed his eyes. I found her body. She was still holding her repair tools, trying to fix a support beam when it came down. Hana said nothing, just listened. I carry her tools now every day, and I remember what she taught me. Humans don't win because we're strong. We win because we don't quit. We adapt. We find a way. He opened his eyes. That's what I'm showing them. That's my promise to her. The final trial came on the 8th day. Doyen was brought to the arena, but this time his opponent wasn't a beast. It was a young Vraz warrior, smaller than Kavros but still 7 feet tall and covered in muscle. It had 2 swords, both glowing with energy. The warrior spoke in Hana, translated from the observation deck. He says, you have dishonored the arena with your tricks. He will show you what real strength means. The warrior attacked immediately. Dome barely blocked the first strike. The impact sent shocks up his arm. The second strike knocked his blade aside. Third cut across his shoulder and blood ran down his arm. He was outmatched completely. The warrior was faster, stronger, and trained since birth for this. Dian was just a mechanic from the asteroid colonies, but he watched. He learned. The warrior always stepped with his right foot first. His backswing was slower than his forward strike. When he attacked high, his lower right arm dropped slightly. Patterns everything. Had patterns, machines, asteroids even. Warriors, Doan started moving. Differently, he stopped trying to block. And started dodging by inches. He stopped trying to attack and started making the warrior overextend. He led the warrior in circles, forcing him to turn a step where Dian wanted. The warrior grew frustrated. His attacks became wilder, angrier, and anger made mistakes. The opening came. The warrior swung high with both swords. His lower right arm dropped. Doyen dropped his worn blade, grabbed the warrior's wrist, and used his momentum to throw him off balance. The warrior stumbled. Doyen caught one of the fallen swords and pressed it to the warrior's throat. The arena went silent. Kavos descended once again. He walked past the fallen warrior without a glance. He circled Doyen, examining him like a puzzle. Then Kavros spoke. His voice was loud enough for the entire arena to hear. Hana translated her voice shaking. He says, you hunt like they do. You don't give up. You find weakness and exploit it. You survive when you should die. She paused. He says, you will join his pack. Du lowered the sword. What does that mean? Hana's eyes were wide. It means you're the first human ever accepted by the Vrise. It means everything just changed. The marking ceremony hurt more than any trial in the arena. Doyen knelt in the center of Kavros's chamber while a Vrise elder pressed heated metal to his shoulder. The clan sigil burned into his skin, smoking and sizzling. He bit down on a leather strap and refused to scream. Kavros stood above him, watching. When the elder finished, Kavros spoke a single word. Hana, standing nearby, translated quietly. Brother Doyen stood on shaking legs. The burn throbbed with every heartbeat, but he was now marked as part of the hunt pack, the most elite warriors among the Vraz, and he was the first human to ever receive this honor. The pack was waiting outside the chamber. There were 12 of them in total, not counting Kavros. Each was a proven warrior, scarred and dangerous. They studied Doyen with expressions that ranged from curiosity to open hostility. One stepped forward. His name was Thraxus, second in command of the pack. He was massive, even by Vraxus standards, with horns that curved back like a ram's. His scales were dark red, almost black. He looked at Doyen the way someone might look at a bug on their boot. This is weak, Thraxi said in broken human language. He had been learning just to insult Doyen properly. Soft, small, will die on first hunt. Doyen met his gaze. Then you'll be surprised. Threxus's eyes narrowed. For a moment, violence hung in the air. Then Kavros spoke sharply. Threxus backed down, but his hostility remained. Another warrior approached. This one was female, her scales a lighter gray with patterns like tiger stripes. Her name was Vorna, and she was the pack's weapons master. Unlike Thraxus, she seemed curious rather than angry. Show hands, she said. Her human language was better, though still rough. Down held out his hands. They were scarred and calloused from years of mechanical work. Forna examined them carefully, running one clawed finger along the marks. Toolmaker hands, she said. Not warrior hands, but survived arena. How? I used my brain, Down replied. Vora made a sound that might have been laughter. Brain. Yes, Brax, forget brain. Sometimes, only one strong, sharp. Fast, she tapped her own head with one finger. But hunt needs brain too. You teach us brain hunting, if you teach me your ways, Diane said. Deal. Forna turned to the others and spoke in Vraxis. Some nodded. Others like Thraxis looked disgusted. Hana was allowed to stay aboard the ship as what the Vrows called the human's keeper. She and Diane were given quarters near the PAX area. The rooms were simple, metal walls, sleeping platforms, and storage for weapons and tools. I can't believe this is happening, Hana said that first night she sat on her platform still, processing everything. 3 months ago, they barely looked at humans. Now you're in the hunt pack. Do you know what that means? Doyen asked. What they'll expect from me? Death, Hana said bluntly. Hunt pack takes the most dangerous mission. They fight things other Vrows won't touch. Their mortality rate is. She paused. Let's just say you should keep surprising them. Training began. The next day, Vora took charge of teaching Doyen their weapons. The Vrows blade was different from human swords. It was heavier, curved differently, designed for someone with 4 arms and incredible strength. Doyen struggled at first. His human arms tired quickly. His grip was wrong. His balance was off. Forna corrected him patiently, showing him modified techniques that worked with 2 arms instead of 4. Human body different, she explained. Weaker, yes, but also lighter, faster turn low center. She demonstrated a move, then had Diane copy it. Use what you have, not what you don't. Threxis watched from the sidelines, occasionally making comments in Vraxis that made others laugh. Diane didn't need translation to know they were insults. The PAX ship traveled through space, hunting what Kavros called spiral breakers. These were beings or creatures that threatened the natural order. The Vraxis believed in something they called the spiral, a philosophy that all life either ascended through struggle or fell into weakness. They don't conquer planets, Hana explained during a break. They test them. If a species shows strength, adaptability, honor, they're recruited. If not, they're ignored, left to evolve or die on their own. And Earth failed. Diane said spectacularly. We're divided into hundreds of nations. We fight ourselves more than external threats. To the Vraz, that's the ultimate weakness. Hana looked at him. But you're changing their minds, one human at a time. 3 weeks into his training, the pack received a distress call. A colony world was under attack by something called rift beasts. These were creatures that came from between dimensions, eating their way into normal space. They consumed everything, matter, energy, life. Kavros gathered the pack in the command center. A hologram showed the colony world. It was beautiful, covered in blue oceans and green forests, but dark spots were spreading across its surface like infection. Those were they. Rift beasts, Kavo spoke in Hana. Translated. 3 hives have formed. The colony species is too weak to fight. We will collapse the hives and kill the queen. Beasts, the hunt begins in 6 hours. Prepare. The pack dispersed to their armories. Doyen followed Vorna to get equipped. She handed him armor made of the same bone-like material as the ship. It was lighter than it looked, but still heavy on his human frame. First hunt, Vorna said. Rift beasts are dangerous. Smart in groups. Use pack tactics. She paused. Threx will try to get you killed. I know, Diane said. Good, then you survive. I like you human. Want to see more brain hunting? She handed him a blade and a small ranged weapon that fired energy bolts. Stay close to me if possible. Threxis may be second, but I am third. I can protect. The drop to the planet was violent. They rode in pods, that crashed through the atmosphere like meteors. Doyen's stomach lurched and his head spun from the G-forces. When the pod finally hit ground and the door opened, he stumbled out into an alien forest. The trees were massive with purple leaves and silver bark. The ground was covered in a moss that glowed faintly. It would have been beautiful if not for the screaming. The rift beasts came from nowhere. One moment the forest was quiet, the next it was full of nightmare creatures. They looked like they were made from broken glass and shadow, constantly shifting shape. Their mouths were holes into darkness. Their claws left tears in reality where they struck. The pack formed up immediately, moving with practiced coordination. Kavros led the center, his 4 blades cutting through rift beasts like they were paper. Threxus and Vorna held the flanks, the others spread out in a loose circle, watching for ambushes. Down stayed close to Vorna like she'd suggested. He fired his energy weapon at any rift beast that got close. The weapon kicked hard and his aim was poor, but he managed to slow several creatures down enough for others to finish them. They pushed deeper into the forest, following the scent of the hive. The rift beasts grew more numerous, more aggressive. Twice Doyen nearly died when creatures flanked him. Twice Vorna's blade saved him at the last second. Then they reached the hive. It was a tear in space itself, a wound in reality that pulsed like a heart. Rift beasts poured from it in waves. Behind them, deeper in the tear, Doyen could see something massive moving. Kavros roared orders. The pack split into 3 groups. One would draw away the smaller beasts, one would protect the flanks, and one, led by Threxus, would collapse the hive by planting explosive charges at specific points around the tier. Thraxus chose his team carefully. He took 3 warriors all loyal to him, and he took Dien. Vorna grabbed Dine's arm. "Watch him," she hissed. They moved quickly, circling around the hive while the others fought. Threx led them to the first charge point and handed out the explosives. Each warrior took a position and planted their charge. When they reached the 3rd point, Thraxus suddenly pointed deeper into the forest. He spoke in Vraxus, gesturing urgently. The other warriors with him nodded and ran in that direction. Doyen was left alone at the 3rd charge point, with a hive full of rift beasts behind him and no backup. He realized too late what Thraxus had done. He'd sent the others on a false lead. He deliberately separated Dien from the pack. If Down died here, it would look like an accident, a weak human who couldn't keep up. Doyen planted his charge with shaking hands. The hive pulsed behind him. He could feel something watching him from inside the tier, something hungry. A rift beast emerged from the darkness, then another, then a dozen. They moved differently than the others, more coordinated. They were surrounding him, cutting off his escape. This was an ambush, not Threxus's ambush. The rift beasts had been waiting. They had learned to predict pack tactics. They had set a trap at this exact point, knowing the pack would plant charges here, and Threxus in his arrogance had walked Dien right into it. Doyen activated his communicator. Ambush at point 3, pattern recognition. They knew we were coming. He heard Kavros roar something in the distance, but they rift beasts were already attacking. Doyen fired his weapon until it overheated. He drew his blade and fought like Vorna had taught him, using his smaller size to dodge between attacks. But there were too many. A claw caught his leg, another struck his shoulder. Pain exploded through him. He fell to his knees. Then Thraxus was there, not to save Diane, but because the rift beast had turned on him too. The giant warrior fought with all four arms, his blades a blur. But even he was being overwhelmed. Pattern, Doyen shouted. In broken visas. The return to the ship was silent. Thraxus walked at the front of the group, his shoulders rigid with anger. Doyen walked at the back, his leg bandaged but still bleeding through. Vora stayed close to him, ready to catch him if he fell. Once aboard, Kavo summoned both of them to his chamber. The other pack members lined the walls, witnessing whatever judgment was coming. Hana stood near the door, ready to translate. Kavo spoke for several minutes. His voice was controlled, but Doyen could hear the anger underneath. When he finished, Hana translated. He says Thexus put a pack member in danger through arrogance, he says. Doyen saved Thraxus' life through observation and warning, he asks. Thraxus what he has to say. Thraxus snarled something back. Hana's face went pale as she translated. He says humans are weak and don't belong in the pack. He says today proves it because Doyen nearly died. He says he was trying to test Doyen's strength. That's a lie. Dorian said quietly. He left me there too. Die. Hana translated. The room went completely silent. Kavo's turned to Dian. He spoke a question. Hana translated. Did you see the rift beast? Pattern, yes. They attacked in groups of 3, always from the same angles. 2. Second pause between waves. They were adapting to our fighting style, learning it. Doyen stepped forward despite his injured leg. We're stronger than them individually, but they think as a group. They predicted where we'd plant the charges and set an ambush. Threx fought them the same way over and over. That's why they were winning. Kavros listened, then he turned to Thraxus and spoke sharply. Thraxus's face twisted with rage, but he nodded once and left the chamber. The other warriors followed, leaving only Kavros, Diyen, Vorna and Hana. What did he say? Toyen asked. He said Thraxus will lead no missions for the next cycle, he said. You saw what Vrax's eyes missed. That is valuable. Hana paused and he said, the human is truly packed now, no more tests. Bora made an approving sound and clapped Doyen on the shoulder hard, enough to make him stumble. Good hunt, small brother. You learn fast. Over the next month things changed. Threx kept his distance, but his open hostility faded to cold respect. The other pack members began including Doyen in their rituals and meals. Forna continued training him, and he grew stronger. Faster, still not Vrax's strong, but better than any human had a right to be. He and Hana worked together to create a database of Vrax's culture. She documented everything while he asked questions. They learned about the spiral philosophy, about the honor codes, about why the Vraxes hunted instead of conquered. They see themselves as caretakers, Hana explained one evening. They test species to see if they're worthy of joining the galactic community. If a species passes, they're protected and guided. If not, they're left alone until they evolve or die out. And Earth failed, Doyen said, because we fight ourselves. We have the technology for space travel, but use it to compete rather than cooperate. To them that's shameful. Hana looked at him. But you're proving that individual humans can be different, that we can adapt, honor our promises, work in packs. Doyen touched the burn scar on his shoulder where the clan sigil was marked. One human isn't Enough to change their minds about. Billions, maybe not, but it's a start. 2 weeks later, everything changed. The ship's alarms blared, Cavros summoned the entire pack to the command center. Immediately, when Diane arrived, Cavros was staring at a hologram of space. His expression was dark. "What is it, Doyen?" asked Hana. She was reading the Vraus symbols on the display. Her face went white. "It's Earth, the outer colonies. They're under attack." The hologram zoomed in to show dozens of ships swarming around the asteroid belt where Diane had grown up. They were organic-looking vessels covered in what looked like insect shells. Swarms of smaller craft poured from them like locusts. "Crash," Vora said, spitting the word like a curse. "Hive species consume everything. Very bad." Diane stepped closer to the hologram. He could see the colony stations, the same ones where he'd worked for years, where he'd lived with me before the accident, where thousands of humans still lived. They were trying to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched the crest. "Ships, we have to help them," Diane said. Cavros turned to look at him. He spoke, and Hana translated. He says, "The Vrax's council has forbidden intervention. Earth is not a protected world. It failed the tests. To interfere would break ancient laws, then break them," Diane said. His voice was hard. "Those are my people, my home." Cavro studied him for a long moment. Then he spoke to the pack in Vraxis. Conversation was rapid, heated. Some warriors agreed with him, others shook their heads. Thraxus surprisingly spoke in favor of helping, gesturing to Dolan several times. Finally, Cavros made his decision. He spoke one sentence and the pack went silent. Hana's voice shook as she translated. He says his pack will go rogue. They will help Earth and they will face the Council's judgment later. Forna whooped and raised her blades. "Good hunt, finally something worth fighting." The journey to Earth's outer colonies took 6 days at maximum speed. During that time, Doyen worked with Cavros to understand the situation. The crash were hive mind species, all controlled by a central queen. They had been expanding through this region of space for decades, consuming resources and populations. "Why Earth?" Doyen asked. "Why now?" Hana researched the Vrais databases. Apparently Earth was recently added to the galactic charts. The crash saw a new, unprotected system, full of resources. They're opportunistic. They'll strip the colonies clean, then move to Earth itself. Doyen felt sick. He thought of his father Taeyang, who still worked as an administrator on one of the larger asteroid stations. He thought of the families, the workers, the people who'd never done anything to deserve this. "How do we fight them?" he asked Cavros. Cavros pulled up tactical displays. He explained and Hana translated. The Kresh fought through overwhelming numbers. They had millions of small craft and larger bioships. Their weakness was the queens. Kill enough queens and the smaller crush would lose coordination, but queens hide in the center of their fleets, Vorna added. Protected by thousands of ships, very hard to reach. Toyin studied the displays. An idea was forming. What if we don't go through them? What if we bring them to us? He explained his plan. It was risky, possibly suicidal. It required the pack to work with human forces. It needed perfect timing, but if it worked, they could kill multiple queens at once. Cavros listened carefully. When Doyen finished, the Alpha Hunter was quiet for several minutes. Then he spoke. Hana translated. He says it's the kind of plan a human Would make crazy desperate and clever, he approves. They arrived at the edge of the battle zone 6 days later. The sight was worse than the hologram had shown. 3 of the smaller colonies were already dark, consumed completely. The larger stations were surrounded, their shields flickering under constant assault. Kavros opened a communication channel to the human military. At first, the humans didn't believe what they were seeing, an alien warship helping them. It seemed impossible. Then Dayan stepped into the view of the camera. He spoke in Korean, his voice steady. My name is Doyen. I'm from the Seongan colony. I'm with the Vraz Hunt. We're here to help. But you need to trust us and follow our lead. There was chaos on the other end. Multiple voices arguing, then one voice cut through the others. It was older, tired but with steel underneath. Doyen, is that really you? It's been almost 4 months. Doyen's breath caught. Father Taeyang and LT Uncle GT's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than Doyen. Remembered, there were new lines around his eyes, new gray in his hair. We thought you were dead. Your shuttle disappeared. I survived and I brought help. Doyen gestured to Kavros standing beside him. This is Kavros Alpha, hunter of the Vraxis. We have a plan to stop the crash, but we need your military to coordinate with us. Taeyang looked at Kavros. Fear flashed across his face, but he controlled it. What do you need? Dayan explained the plan. The human forces would draw out the Crush Queens by pretending to retreat. They'd lead them to a specific point in space. Meanwhile, the Hunt pack would position themselves for an ambush. When the Queens arrived, they'd strike fast and hard, killing as many as possible before the Crush could respond. It requires trust, Dayan said. Your people have to follow Vaxra's tactics. My pack has to trust your pilots not to break formation. Can you do that? Taeyang was quiet, then he nodded. Tell me what you need. The pack spread out, positioning themselves at different points around the ambush zone. Doyen worked with a human pilot named Hyun, teaching him the basics of Vrax's hunting patterns. Hun was young, maybe 22, with nervous energy but good instincts. You're really working with them? Hun asked, looking at the Vraxis warriors preparing their weapons. They're my pack, Dayan said simply, and they're risking everything to help us. That makes them more human than most people I've met. Hun nodded slowly. Okay, tell me what to do. The battle would begin in 3 hours. Doyen stood on the bridge with Kavros watching the preparations. The Alpha Hunter looked at him and spoke. Hana translated. He says you're choosing to fight for your birth pack instead of your warrior pack. He asks if you're sure. Dune met his gaze. I'm fighting for both. Isn't that what family means? Kavros's expression shifted. It might have been a smile. The crash fleet came like a swarm of locusts, thousands of biohips, each one pulsing with organic lights. At the center of the formation were the Queens, massive vessels that looked like floating wombs. They were the size of small moons protected by layers of smaller craft. Doyen watched from the bridge as the human forces led the crash deeper into the ambush zone. Hyun was leading the fighter wing, flying in patterns Dayan had taught him, aggressive but not reckless, drawing the enemy forward without exposing himself. They're taking the bait, Hana said, monitoring the displays. The Queens are following. Kavros gave the signal. The Hunt pack ships dropped from stealth, appearing from 4 different directions. They opened fire. Immediately, energy weapons tearing into the crush formation, the element of surprise was total. Doyen's role was specific. He and Vorna would lead a small team into the largest queenship and plan an antimatter charge in its core. It was a human weapon. Experimental and dangerous. If it worked, it would create a chain reaction that would destroy multiple queen ships at once. If it didn't work, they'd all die. The infiltration team consisted of Doyen, Vorna, Thraxus, Hyan, and 2 other Vraxis warriors. They rode in a small assault craft that dodged through the chaos of battle. Explosions lit up space around them. Ships burned and died. On all sides, Han flew like he was possessed. He wove between crash fighters, using tricks Doyen had taught him, combined with human creativity. Twice they should have been hit, twice. Hyan's instinct saved them. Good flying. Human, Vorna shouted over the noise. You have Hunter's mind. They reached the queenship's outer hull. The surface was organic, pulsing like skin. Thraxus used his blade to cut through, creating an opening. They poured inside, weapons ready. The interior was a nightmare. Walls made of flesh, floors that moved beneath their feet. The air was hot and humid, filled with organic smells, and everywhere crashed drones waiting to defend their queen. The battle inside was brutal and close. The corridors were narrow, perfect for ambushes. Doyen fought beside Vorna, their movement synchronized for months of training. He wasn't as strong as the Vraus, but he was faster in tight spaces. He could fit through gaps they couldn't strike from. Unexpected angles, they fought their way deeper. Yun stayed close to Doyen, covering his back. The young pilot was terrified but controlled it. He followed orders, worked with the pack. Didn't panic. You're doing good, Doyen told him during a brief pause. Just stay focused. I'm fighting inside an alien ship with alien warriors, Hyan said, his voice shaking. This is insane. Yeah. Diane agreed, but it's working. Come on. They reached the core chamber. It was massive, a cavern of flesh and bone. At the center was the queen herself, a grotesque thing the size of a building. She was laying eggs constantly, each one splitting open to release new drones. Her psychic presence pressed down on them like a weight. Vorna planted the antimatter charge and set the timer. 5 minutes. They needed to get out before it detonated, but the queen knew what they were doing. She screamed, a sound that wasn't just noise but a psychic blast. Doyen felt it in his mind, showing him visions. MJI dying in the tunnel, his father killed by crash, earth burning, failure, weakness, death. He fell to his knees, hands clutching his head around him, and the others were affected too. Even the Vraxis warriors were struggling against the psychic assault. Then Thraxus was there, pulling Doyen to his feet. The big warrior spoke in broken human language. Stand, brother. Stands, not fall here. Doyen focused on Thraxus's voice, on the promise he made to me, on the pack that had accepted him. The visions faded. He stood everyone out. Vorna shouted for minutes. They ran behind them, and the queen screamed again. Drones poured from every corridor trying to stop them. The team fought their way back step by step. One Vry's warrior fell, overwhelmed by numbers. Another was wounded badly but kept moving. They reached the exit hole they'd cut. Hyan's ship was waiting, hovering just outside, but more drones were coming, too many to fight through. Go, Doyen shouted to the others. I'll hold them. No, Vorna grabbed his arm. Pack doesn't leave pack, someone has to. Hold this position or they'll destroy the ship before we can escape. Doyen pulled away. He had Mi's tools on his belt still. He pulled out a cutting torch and handed it to Hyan. Get everyone out. I'll follow when the path is clear. Threx spoke rapidly in Vraxis. Hana wasn't there to translate, but Doyen understood the tone. Argument. Refusal. I'm faster than you in tight spaces. Doyen said, trust me, I'll make it. He turned and fired at the approaching drones before they could argue more. Vorna snarled something but pushed the wounded warrior toward the exit. Threxus hesitated, then followed. Hyan was the last to go, looking back at Diyen with fear in his eyes. Fly safe, Doyen said. See you outside. The ship pulled away. Doyen was alone in the corridor with dozens of drones approaching. He had 3 minutes before the antimatter charge detonated. He needed to hold this position for 1 minute to make sure that ship got clear. Then he needed to find another way out. The drones attacked. Doyen fought like the Vraxes had taught him, aggressive, never backing up. Using the environment, he collapsed part of the corridor with his energy weapon. Blocking half the drones, he threw a grenade down another passage, buying seconds, but there were too many. A claw caught his side, tearing through armor. Another struck his leg. He fell, landing hard on the organic floor. The drones moved in for the kill. Then the wall exploded inward. Kavros crashed through, his 4 blades spinning. The Alpha Hunter was a storm of violence, cutting through drones like they were nothing. He grabbed Diyen with one arm and kept fighting with the others. Stupid small brother, Kavros said in broken human language. Brothers don't die alone. They ran together. Kavros carrying Diyen like he weighed nothing. The ship was gone, but there was another exit point ahead. Kavros had come in a different way, through a maintenance tunnel. They dove through it as the timer hit 30 seconds. Outside, Kavros's personal fighter was waiting, piloted by another pack member. They jumped in. Ship launched just as the antimatter charge detonated. The explosion was like a new sun being born. The Queen ship tore itself apart from the inside. The energy chain reacted to the other queens nearby, just as Diyen had predicted. 5 queen ships died in the blast. Without their queens, the crashed drones went chaotic. They stopped coordinating, started attacking each other. The human forces and the remaining Varaxis ships tore through them easily. Within an hour, the battle was over. The crash retreated. The colonies were saved. Diyen woke up in the medical bay. His wounds had been treated with Vraxis medicine, which worked faster than human tech but hurt more. He groaned and tried to sit up. Stay down, fool. Human, Vorna said. She was sitting nearby, cleaning her blades. You lose too much blood. Did we win? Doyen asked. Yes, 5 queens dead. Crash running away. Colony safe. She looked at him with something like approval. Was good. Plan crazy but good. The door opened, and Kavo entered, followed by Hana and Taeyang. Doyen's father looked strained on the Vraxis ship, small and fragile compared to the warriors, but he walked with dignity. He approached Diane's bed. For a long moment, father and son just looked at each other. Then Taeyang spoke. You've changed. A lot has happened, Doyen said. I can see that. Taeyang touched the clan sigil burned into Diane's shoulder. Are you still human? Yes, Diane said firmly. I'll always be human, but I'm also Vrax's pack now. Is that okay? Taeyang and LT Uncan GTS. Eyes were wet, you saved us, you and your pack, of course it's okay, he embraced Diane carefully, mindful of his injuries. I'm proud of you, son, your sister would be proud too. They held each other for a moment, then Taeyang stepped back. The human government wants to meet with Cavros. There's talk of an alliance, trade, cooperation. Everything is changing, Cavro spoke in Hana. Translated, he says the Vraxis Council is angry. They're sending a judgment fleet. His pack will be sanctioned for breaking the law. What does that mean? Toyin asked. Exile probably, maybe. Worse. Hana looked worried. They're being punished for helping us. Doyen tried to stand. Pain shot through his leg, but he forced himself up. He faced Cavros. I won't let them punish you. You saved my people. Cavros placed a hand on Doyen's head, a gesture of affection. He spoke in Hana. Translated, he says it's worth it. He says humans earned their place. He says you prove that family is more than species. He calls you brother. Now and always. The next few days were chaotic. The human military wanted to study Vrax's technology. Scientists wanted to understand their culture. Politicians wanted to negotiate treaties. Through it all, Doyen served as translator and bridge between worlds. The Vraxis Council arrived 1 week later. Their flagship was twice the size of Cavros' ship, covered in the symbols of ancient authority. Doyen stood beside Cavros as the council leaders came aboard. They were old, scarred, terrifying. They spoke in formal V-ruse. That was hard to understand, but the message was clear. Cavros had broken sacred law. His pack would be disbanded. He would be stripped of his rank unless humanity could prove they were worthy. After all, the head counselor, an ancient warrior named Rekus, looked at Doyen. She spoke in Hana. Translated, you are the human who joined the hunt pack. You are the one who changed everything.